Amara never imagined that a single phone call from her exhausted older sister, Lena, would change the entire course of her life, but that morning, while she stood in her small kitchen preparing tea before heading to her part-time tutoring job, Lena called with a shaky voice, begging her to cover her shift at the mansion where she worked as a maid. Lena had fallen sick with a fever, and their mother's medication needed to be bought that same day, so without hesitation, Amara said yes, tied her hair neatly, put on one of Lena's spare uniforms, and hurried across the city toward the grandest home she had ever seen in her life, a palace-like mansion overlooking the valley, owned by a man she had only heard rumors about, Mr. Adrian Hale, the millionaire who rarely smiled, the man whose wife had passed away 2 years ago, leaving him withdrawn, distant, and living alone with his grief. When Amara stepped inside the mansion, she felt instantly out of place. The ceiling soared high with crystal chandeliers, the polished floors gleamed like mirrors, and everything was so silent she could hear her own heartbeat. Yet she reminded herself that she wasn't there to be impressed, only to help her sister, so she greeted the head butler, an older man named Martin, who gave her a surprised look but allowed her in after hearing her explanation. Her first task was simple: tidy the living room and dust the shelves. But as she worked, she noticed how lifeless the house felt, as if laughter had once lived here but had been chased away by sorrow. While cleaning the tall bookshelf, she accidentally knocked a small framed photo onto the floor, and as she leaned down to pick it up, she saw a picture of a younger, smiling Adrian with a woman who looked radiant with happiness, his late wife, she assumed, and a wave of compassion washed over her, though she quickly placed the frame back exactly where it belonged. But fate stepped in when she moved to clean the music room, pushing open the heavy wooden door only to find Adrian Hale himself sitting at the grand piano, his back turned to her, his fingers frozen over the keys at the sound of the door creaking, and for a moment Amara felt her breath catch because she had never expected to see him there, looking like a portrait brought to life, wearing a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, his hair slightly messy as if he had been running his hands through it in frustration. Adrian stood up abruptly, clearly unhappy to be interrupted, but when his eyes met hers, something in his expression softened, not because he recognized her, but because she was not staring at him with fear or admiration like most people did. Instead, she simply apologized for intruding and bowed slightly, ready to leave, yet he surprised her by saying in a quiet, tired voice, "You're new," and Amara nodded, explaining that she had come in her sister's place, for reasons he couldn't understand. Her presence seemed to settle something inside him, and rather than dismiss her, he quietly returned to the piano, attempting to play again but failing as his fingers trembled with emotion. Sensing his struggle, Amara gently asked if he wanted her to finish cleaning later so he could have privacy, but he shook his head, telling her to continue because he was already done for the morning. Though they exchanged no further words, she caught him glancing at her a few times, almost as if her quiet, respectful energy eased the heavy loneliness he carried. Over the next few hours, Amara worked diligently, and when lunchtime came, she brought a tray to Adrian's study as instructed, expecting to simply leave it at the door, but he surprised her again by saying, "Set it there, please," inviting her inside. As she arranged the dishes, he studied her curiously, noticing how different she was from others. She wasn't trying to impress him, wasn't intimidated by his wealth, and wasn't fawning over him the way many did. Instead, she carried a natural gentleness, a sincerity he hadn't seen in a long time, and he found himself asking questions about her sister, her family, and her day as if he were desperate for normal human connection. Amara answered politely, never crossing boundaries, and when she excused herself, Adrian watched her leave with a strange feeling in his chest, one he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. By the time her shift ended, Martin stopped her at the door and said quietly that he hadn't seen the master speak so much in months, and that something about her presence had brought a little warmth back into the house, which made Amara smile but also confused her. She was nobody special, just covering for her sister, and she certainly didn't expect that the millionaire himself would notice her again. However, the following morning, when Lena was still too ill to work, Amara was sent again, and this time Adrian seemed almost relieved when he saw her walking through the corridor, carrying her cleaning supplies. He kept finding excuses to be in the same room she was in, sometimes pretending to read, other times pretending to work, but Amara saw through it. He was lonely, painfully lonely, and he simply didn't know how to be alone anymore. She treated him kindly, without pity, and without fear, and slowly, the mansion began to fill with something new, hope. Over the days that followed, he began opening up about his late wife, about how he stopped playing the piano because music reminded him of her, and how he had shut himself away from the world because grief had become the only thing he knew. Amara listened quietly, offering gentle words when appropriate and silence when necessary, and Adrian found himself slowly coming back to life, rediscovering moments of calm whenever she was near. One evening, a storm cut the power briefly, leaving the mansion in flickering candlelight, and as Amara rushed to close a window in the music room, Adrian laughed for the first time in 2 years when she shrieked after a raindrop splashed her hair, and she froze, startled not by the rain but by the sound of his laughter, warm, rich, and heartbreakingly human. Standing there, with the soft thunder rumbling outside, he whispered, "I didn't think I remembered how to laugh," and Amara felt something shift in the air between them. Destiny had brought her there for a reason, not just to help her sister, but to heal a man who had been silently drowning. By the end of the week, when Lena recovered, Adrian personally requested that Amara stay on as staff, offering her double the pay and flexible hours so she could still help her family and continue her studies. But deep down he knew it wasn't simply her work ethic that made him want her there. It was her presence, her kindness, her courage to speak honestly even when he was difficult, and her way of bringing life back into the rooms that had felt dead for too long. Amara accepted, not because of the salary, but because she cared for the men beneath the wealth, the men who was learning to smile again. And as their story continued, full of healing, unexpected tenderness, and a bond that destiny itself had woven, the narrator reminds you, dear viewer, that if you want to know what happens next in their journey, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, because more heart-touching stories like this are on the way, stories of hope, destiny, and the surprising way life brings the right people together when they least expect it.